Anyway, so I think we should hop into the datasheet breakdowns now, because
Right.
they don't really have that many. They only have 3 data sheets for 9 different models, compared to their Astartes brethren. It's not too much.
Yeah.
So Ryan, why don't you start with the Grey Knight profile, just like the standard?
Yeah. So they basically have the same sort of data sheet as your standard tactical marine. Just a 6-inch movement, 3-up weapon skill and ballistic skill, strength 4, toughness 4, 1 wound, 1 attack, 7 leadership, and a 3-up save. I don't really want to break down like their standard kit, like their storm bolters. Everyone knows what a storm bolter does, but they do have some interesting weapon options that are exclusive only to Grey Knights. So first off, the Justicar, who is always going to be your leader, basically, they can replace their kit with a Nemesis Force Halberd, a Demon Hammer, a Warding Stave, or 2 Nemesis Falchions. And then the Gunners, they can replace their Nemesis Force Swords with and Storm Bolters with an Incinerator, Silencer, or Side Cannon. And we'll get into those weapons a little later on. Their abilities, they have And They Shall Know No Fear, standard for all the Space Marine factions. They have Demon Hunters. If this model attacks any demons in the fight phase, you can reroll failed wound rolls for those attacks. Transhuman Physiology, so they're ignoring the first flesh wound to when they're making hit rolls. And they have Rites of Banishment. So when this model manifests the Cybolt psychic power, it has a range of 12 inches. And if Cybolt is successfully manifested, the target model is a demon, the target suffers D3 mortal wounds, even if the result of the psychic test was not 11 plus.
Yeah, and that one is only really useful against Plague Bearers because they have the Feel No Pain.
Right.
Currently, demons don't have any multi-wound models, so it's a little bit underwhelming. But
yeah.
That Demon Hunters thing, the re-rolling failed wound rolls in the fight phase, that's pretty huge if you're in that matchup.
Yeah. For their specialist, the Justicar could be a leader. Any of the other following specialisms. The Gunners are the only models from this data sheet that can be the heavy specialist, and then any of them can be a combat, comms, demo, veteran, or zealot spec.
So do we want to jump into some of these weapons that the Grey Knights and the Justicar can take? Because there's some strong stuff in there.
Yeah.
So even the basic Nemesis Force Sword is, strength user, AP -3, D3 damage.
Yeah, and like the craziest thing is that's that sounds like an awesome profile, and nobody plays with that, which is the craziest thing, because one of the great things about the Grey Knights that we kind of already mentioned was that they have these melee weapons, but they keep their storm bolters when they get them. If you even look at the models, you can see that their storm bolters like wrist mounted, so they can keep their storm bolter, which is a sweep base ranged weapon, and it can have the Force Sword. But when you do the math, the falchions are usually the better choice. And it's only a point to add the pair, and just the way the points of the Grey Knights work out is you can fit 6 base Grey Knights on the list, and no matter how you equip them, you will always be able to fit 6. So if you were to take the limitations of like you can only have 2 gunners, you can only have 1 Justicar, no matter how you kit them out, you can go all out with the most expensive options, you can still fit 6. So you're going to take the mathematically like best weapons, and that never ends up being the Force Sword. Or there might be some weird edge case that I hadn't thought about, but usually the Nemesis Falchions is even better. So that, like, right up front, shows how powerful they can be. That Force Sword with AP -3 D3 damage still isn't the best option.
Yeah. So I'll just go through the melee weapons list for them now. Starting off, they have the Nemesis Demon Hammer. It is strength times 2, AP minus 3, flat 3 damage, and just like most thunder hammers or power fists or weapons of those kind, when attacking with the weapon, you must subtract 1 from the hit roll. The pair of Nemesis Falchions are strength user AP minus 2 D3, and then they get an extra attack when you equip the pair. The Force Halberd is strength plus 1 AP minus 2 D3, and then the Justicar can take the Nemesis Warding Stave, and that is a strength plus 2 AP minus 1 D3, and the model that's armed with it gains a 5-up invuln save against attacks made against it in the fight phase. And if it already has an invuln save, you add 1 to the invulnerable saving throws you make for it in the fight phase instead. So, quick aside, like a Terminator, taking this weapon would go from a 5-up invuln to a 4-up invuln in the fight phase.
And I'm actually kind of a big fan of the Warding Stave. I think it's a really good weapon to take against kind of like chaff units like T3 models, because the strength plus 2 takes a strength 4 Grey Knight or a strength 4 Grey Knight Terminator to strength 6. So they're wounding on 2s against those T3 models. And what you're sacrificing is AP minus 1 instead of AP minus 2 or AP minus 3. But against those types of models, you don't really need a lot of AP.
Yeah. So some of the exclusive ranged weapons that the Grey Knights can take are the Incinerator, which is it's basically a strength 6 flamer, so 8-inch range assault D6, strength 6 AP minus 1 damage, automatically hits just like any other flamer. The Silencer is a 24-inch heavy 6 weapon with strength 4 AP 0 D3 damage. The Psy Cannon is also 24 inches heavy 4, strength 7, AP minus 1 damage. And then they also get the Psych Out Grenade. And I was looking at this earlier, and I'm not sure how you feel about this weapon. I'm interested to hear what you guys have to say. Just like any other grenade, it's got a 6-inch range. It's Grenade D3, strength 2, AP 0. Yeah, right, like that's it right there. Damage 1, and then its special ability it gets is each time you roll a hit roll of 6 up for this weapon when targeting a Psyker or Demon, the target suffers a mortal wound instead of the normal damage. So looking at this grenade weapon right here, just because we're on the topic, I don't think it's very good at all. So that's strength 2, yeah.
Right. Well, the thing is, you're not ever counting on a wound roll, right? It's when a hit roll of 6 is rolled, it suffers a mortal wound. So you're never sure you're gonna roll the wound because that's what you do, but it's pretty much, imagine this says once per shooting phase you may pick a model within 6 inches on a 6 that takes a mortal wound. So if you would imagine that it says that instead, then it almost sounds a little bit attractive, but as it looks and normally that would be something like, what is it, the Rite of Flame or something like that? I played Thousand Suns for the first time yesterday, and I saw that, what is it, Rite of Flame within 12 inches.
I think it's like the Eye of Flame, yeah,
or whatever it is, yeah. So
the Eye of Zeech, or yeah,
something like that, yeah. So within and that's during the psychic phase. But if you roll a d6 on a 6, they take a mortal wound. So this is basically that with a 6-inch range. And you have to forego using your regular shooting attack, but the cool thing is with this is it says each time you roll a hit roll of 6 up, which can be modified. So if you have you could comms buff somebody throwing a Psych Out Grenade, and now on a roll of 5 up to hit, they suffer a mortal wound. So that is a thing you could do. I don't know that it's ever the best thing you could do.
Yeah. It sounds cute, Sean, but
it's cute to think about. I don't know. I'm just realizing this at the moment too. But no, it's when you have storm bolters on everybody, it's probably better just to do that.
Yeah. I can't imagine, even with all that, the odds are better than just using a crack grenade or a frag grenade, or better yet, your storm bolter.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, so do you guys want to go a little deeper into any of the other, like, the Grey Knight exclusive ranged weapons?
Pretty much
I-
always take the silencer instead of the psi cannon.
Yeah, I was going to say that too. I think people have done the math, and the psi cannon, despite that strength 7, AP -1, I don't think it actually ever outperforms really that often against the silencer.
Mm-hmm. Not just because the silencer has that D3 damage output.
Right.
And then you make him a demo spec, wounding on, well, not wounding on, but turns it from a strength 4 weapon to a strength 5 weapon. Yeah.
Essentially, yeah.
The Incinerator, kind of a straightforward weapon.
Really good flamer.
Yeah.
Same flamer bonuses with the same flamer downfalls in that it's only 1 damage. So in the end, you're still rolling against an injury roll on 1 die. But strength 6 AP -1 is no joke.
This is like one of the best flamers in the game.
I think it is the best.
I
haven't looked at the Thousand Suns flamers in a minute, but yeah, I think these are the best that I've played against in a long time.
It's like a heavy flamer, except it's strength 6 instead of strength 5, and it's assault instead of heavy.
Yeah.
It's just
So
crazy against like T3 armies.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Anything else we want to touch on? Obviously, the Storm Bolter rocks as a general weapon that you just get for free.
Yeah. When we get into the tactics, we'll talk about why the Storm Bolters can go from pretty decent to great, in my opinion. But if we want to get stuck in with some of the units that they got in Elites, we can move on to that now.
Do you want to compare melee weapons now? Because there are, doing the math.
Right.
Yeah, so doing the math on the, so we talked about the Demon Hammer, the Falchions, some of the other ones. As I said earlier, the Falchions are kind of the default for only a point.
Mm-hmm.
You're losing 1 AP compared to the Force Sword, but you're getting an extra attack. So the math works out that it's just better. And even the Demon Hammer, it's, so you're going to go up to strength 8, AP -3, 3 damage, but subtracting 1 from the hit roll and not getting the bonus attack from the Falchions, like most of the time, the Falchions are still better. The only time you really want to do the Demon Hammer is if it's on a model with 2 attacks. So that'll be your Justicar or a combat spec. And even then, it only really gets you to the injury roll more often if you're against like a Marine equivalent.
Mm-hmm.
So because the strength 8 against the toughness 4, you're wounding on 2s, where the Falchions you're wounding on 4, so that's a big deal. And then the AP -3 advantage of the hammer ends up being a big deal too. So you're going to get to the injury roll more often if you have 2 attacks and against a Marine. And then obviously once you get to the injury roll, 3 damage, like it's almost a guaranteed kill. D3 damage, like you have a pretty good shot. But so if your guy has 2 attacks and you're against a beefy guy, like sure you'll want to muster some hammers, but otherwise just put Falchions on like everything.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and also it's probably important to talk about the point costs of the weapons. A Demon Hammer is 2 points. A Nemesis Falchion is a Demon Hammer is 2 points for a Grey Knight. The point differences between models like a Terminator or Paladin, it costs 4 points to get that Demon Hammer.
Right.
The Force or the Falchion is 1 extra point basically, and the Force Halberd is, I believe it's free, and so is the Warding
It's free.
Stave.
Yeah, the Force Swords, Warding Staves, and Falchions are free for your standard Grey Knights.
Yeah, they do get pricier for the elite units.
Mm-hmm.
But again, Grey Knights are not that customizable, which, is kind of bad. But honestly, for me, it's kind of a stress relief that I don't have to think too hard about it because there aren't as many options. But again, if you're running 6 guys, it doesn't really matter what you load them out with. You can afford it. And so the points end up not really mattering that much, which feels kind of weird, but it works. Now, if you start including an elite unit, then maybe you need to pay it a little bit more attention to make sure it all fits. But yeah, with your 6 standard guys, like put what you want on them, it's going to work.
Yeah. And I guess going into Terminators and Paladins, I think it's worth saying that you're only ever going to consider this at 125 points, right? I mean,
Right.
at 100 points, it's just too. I mean, you're basically holding 4 models at that point. But at 125 points, if you take one Terminator, for instance, you have a 5 model kill team, and I guess it's a bit tough to go out there at 125 points with only 5 models.
Yeah.
But what do you guys think, Sean? What do you think of running a Terminator at 125?
So, I mean, I definitely put him in my command roster because if nothing else. So really what a Terminator represents is the threat of a deep strike. So 1 CP, you're going to get a guy dropping 5 inches away, probably with an Incinerator, because it only costs 1 point for an Incinerator for them. So that's really what you're threatening when you muster a Terminator. So you kind of force them to respond to that. And if that's worth it to you, having that threat on the board, then great, take one. You obviously get more than that. It's a 2-up save, 5-up invul, 2 wounds, but a Terminator, a base Terminator costs exactly twice the amount as a Grey Knight. So do you want 2 regular guys or do you want 1 Terminator? And so 2 wounds on 1 body or 1 wound each on 2 bodies. And we've already seen that lots of other factions have that choice too. And generally speaking, spreading the wounds out over multiple bodies tends to work out better. Especially with multi-damage weapons being so popular. It's like, if you have 2 damage weapons all over the place, then it doesn't matter that your Terminator has 2 wounds. So you're really paying for the deep strike potential, and then kind of like the 5-up save, the 5-up invul, that's absolutely relevant. And the deep strike potential, but
yeah,
usually I won't.
Go ahead.
I've brought them to the table once or twice, mostly just to play around with that deep strike. But then once we hit the table and the first movement phase happened, it was like, oh, once you actually measure out 5 inches away from everybody, I'm kind of deploying only on my side of the board or on the extreme edges anyway, and I could have just walked my guy up or done an outflank. So I didn't need a Terminator if I wanted to do reserves. So to me, it's not necessarily that useful. It does kind of keep people in check if they want to go like, I don't know, the invul makes them force dice, and it just might mess up their positioning a little bit, knowing that they need to kind of spread out and screen out the deep strike threat.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think there's a bit of merit to running a regular Terminator or a Terminator gunner, kind of like you said with the Incinerator. It's just kind of the biggest question is it, how much does it hurt to go down from 6 models to 5? And I think depending on the matchup, there's certain factions where you're going to drop a Terminator in the middle of the board and nobody's going to want to go near it. They're not going to want to touch it. They're going to want to avoid it. It might even be kind of a mind game just to have a Terminator on the board.
Yeah.
I mean, the stats, obviously, it's a regular Terminator profile. It's 2 wounds. It's got the 2-up save. But something I think is kind of interesting, worth talking about, is Terminators have access to all those weapons, the melee weapons. And Terminators, unlike a Grey Knight, has 2 attack space. And a Terminator Justicar has 3 attack space. So you could get, kind of like we were saying before with the that warding stave, that you put that on a Terminator, just a regular base Terminator, and that is, let me check the points here. It's 36 plus it's 3. Yeah, 3 for the Terminator to take the warding stave. That gives them a 4-ups invuln in fighting phase on top of a 2-up base invuln, with more attacks than you're going to see from a regular Grey Knight. Or if you just give them the pair of falchions, and make him a combat specialist, you have a Terminator running around with like 4 attacks at least.
Oh yeah, and that's that guy's brutal.
And 2 wounds.
Yeah, I think in certain, if you're ever in that mustering phase, and obviously you're always going to have a Terminator on your roster just because there's only so many things you can take with Grey Knights. If you're looking across the board and you're seeing a faction and you're thinking, I don't know, or like you look at the roster of your opponent and you're thinking, I don't know if they even have something to deal with this. Because some people don't put something on their roster that can deal with like a Grey Knight Terminator. I think there's merit to it.
Yeah, if they don't have any AP, it's or very weak AP, that's a base 2-up save. And against the regular guys have a 3-up save anyway, so they're going to be bringing all the AP they have, but or just spamming dice. But it's there are definitely times when you wish you had had it. It's a shame that like if Grey Knights had access to like scouts or something that was a little bit cheaper than 18 points of potty, then and you could have like some like obviously not full horde, but some option that was 10 or 12 points just to get more bodies, then I think you would see Terminators come up a lot more often. But needing to go down to 5 bodies is a hard sell.
I mean, do you think there's an argument to be made that with 6 bodies at 125 points, you're probably going to be losing the positional game anyway?
Maybe, but if nothing else, since one of the main ways to beat Cybolt is already to kind of control your positioning and control who's closer, one of the great things about Grey Knight is like any of those bodies could do a Cybolt. So if you have 6 bodies on the board kind of fanned out, they can maybe control who the targets are in one part of the board. Well, just choose somebody else to do the Cybolt. And having 6 bodies versus 6 sources of Cybolts versus 5 sources of Cybolts is a big deal.
Ryan, did you want to add something?
Maybe just to round back to the whole deep striking with the Terminator. I think there's an argument to be made for keeping the Terminator in reserve, even if you don't plan on bringing it on the board using outflank or teleport strike, just in case your opponent sitting across from you also has models that you think he'll wind up putting in reserve as well. So you can kind of counter him no matter who has the initiative in that round. So say they win the initiative and they choose to teleport strike or deep strike or whatever a model in your backfield, and your Grey Knights, you're not going to be effectively be able to like screen out anything. You can like just drop the Terminator, assuming he's got like the Incinerator, just drop him in your backfield for free out of reserves in your own deployment zone, and then you can just flame on.
That sounds kind of familiar, Ryan.
Yeah.
What do you think about this?
I've had some experience.
Yeah. I think in general with a psychic model, putting something in reserve, it has a lot of potential to get that Cybolt down on a model that, I don't know, like the second you put something down in reserve, especially a model with Cybolt, your opponent is kind of forced to either totally ignore it and just play like they normally would, which usually ends up backfiring, or they have to make moves that they otherwise wouldn't want to try and screen you out or play around that potential deep strike. And I think there's a lot of power in that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So are we ready to jump into Paladins? Because I don't.
Yeah.
I'm not sure
I don't know if
anybody wants to jump into Paladins actually, but yeah, go ahead, Sean.
Yeah, it's a Terminator, but it has 3 wounds and 3 attacks. So, which is neat, and I guess as I mentioned earlier, with Terminators is tough because they get 2 wounds, but with so many 2 damage weapons around or D3 damage weapons, like it might not end up being that much better than 1 wound. But Paladins having 3 wounds, like now it can survive one of those attacks, and like you could roll get the 3 on the D3, or there are 3 damage weapons around now, but. So it can survive a little bit more. The tricky thing with the Paladin is that if you want to take upgrade a Terminator to a Paladin, so now you're running 4 of the standard Grey Knights plus a Paladin, those Grey Knights need to be absolute bare bones to make the points work. And I don't remember off the top of my head exactly how bare bones, but I'm pretty sure it's possible to have 4 standard and a paladin, but you may even be giving up falchions at that point. Or maybe you can have the falchions, but you can't have 2 heavy weapons. And that's I think too big of a sacrifice to make for an extra wound and attack. Like if we were doing one of those crazy games that some people do at like 150 points or even more, like sure, I would play around with a paladin, but yeah, I don't know that we'll really see them hit the table otherwise.
All right, hear me out here.
Oh boy.
Okay.
What about the fated 3-man kill team with the 50-point Paragon kitted up with whatever he starts with?
Just play Custodes.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's like
Shane, you're fired.
2 Terminators. And then you have the Terminator with the Incinerator, and then the other Terminator with
or does that or does that end? Wait, are we accidentally releasing this into the wild? Is that just Custodes with Stybolts? Because that's all that Custodes needs, right?
Yeah, right, yeah. I'm cutting this segment. I'm cutting this segment out.
Think of any matchup that loses to Custodes, and then give Custodes Cybolts in that matchup.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Never mind, this didn't happen.
I want Shane's wild ride.
Yeah.
I know what I'm running next week.
I guess that's fair. Yeah. Like that's high key terrifying.
You don't even need to kit them because they already have 2 and 3 attacks.
They don't even need weapons. They just have Cybolts, so who cares?
Yeah, though, I mean, I don't think there's much to say about the Paladins.
Mm-hmm.
They're ridiculously strong, but like I said, like a Paragon is 50 points, and a regular Paladin is 47 points. Yeah.
Yeah, they're too big the cost investment.
Yeah, that's a lot.